Welcome to the D Shift Podcast, where we provide inspiration, motivation, and education to help you transition from the challenges of divorce to discover the freedom and ability to live life on your own terms. Are you ready? Let's get this shift started. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the D Shift Podcast. And I'm so glad to have you here today because we're going to talk about intimacy in all its different forms and levels. And I have Dr. Dan Sneider. He's a licensed couples therapist, an educator, and creator of the Intimacy Shift, a blueprint for moving from conflict to lasting connection. And I think that Dr. Dan has a really important message for us because he's going to share with us about what intimacy is, isn't, and how to make a relationship work. Or if you're already in the divorce process and you know, nope, that one is not lasting, at least you can have some really good strategies for getting into a new relationship and having that really healthy connection and communication. So, Dan, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Marty. I'm really excited to talk about all things divorce and relationships today.
Yeah, and I think, we think of divorce as the ending of a relationship, but it's really just a pivot point because you're probably going to move forward to another relationship at some point in time in your life, and having a really good foundation for how to get that intimacy going is so important. Before we get into
Mhm.
all the meat and potatoes of what we want to talk about,
Mhm.
is it okay to call you Dan or should I call you Dr. Dan?
Oh, Dan is fine.
Dan, okay, wonderful. Dan, tell us a little bit about why you picked this area to focus on in your work.
Yeah, happy to. So, yeah, of course, we all have a long story of where we come from, and I'll give some bullets for your listeners because this work that I do is very much rooted in my story and things that I experienced. And so, I grew up in a household that was very chaotic, dysfunctional. I had a very kind, loving mother who I'm incredibly close with and also was not able to, protect me or my sister from what was happening in the household with my dad. My dad would come home either very hot, angry, hot-tempered, or very cold, distant, and withdrawn. And so, even though I was physically safe in the home, it was not an emotionally safe place to grow up with. And later on in my early teen years, my parents separated and divorced, and that was very much a model for me of not the relationship that I want, certainly not the separation or divorce that I wanted either, which comes into my story later because as a young adult and trying to navigate relationships, I very much, like all of us, wanted connection. I wanted closeness. I wanted a partner. And then when I found that, realized that I lacked a lot of the skills that I needed for that relationship to feel loving, to be able to express my needs and wants. And as wonderful as that relationship was and the beautiful children that we had together, we did end up separating and divorcing. And through that whole time, I was working as a therapist. I was starting to work with couples because, again, as I wanted to figure these things out, I gravitated to that area to both help people and also to help myself. And so now I'm on the other side of that divorce. We co parent really well. Our divorce and our co parenting looks much different than my parents made that work when I was a kid. So, in that area, success. And then in other areas, a lot to learn from. And I'm a much better therapist and feel much more qualified to work with relationships for having kind of been through all of those different experiences. And very happy to share that I am in a fabulous, healthy, loving relationship now that I'm able to practice and use all of the amazing things that I've learned along the way.
Wow. And that's wonderful. And it's amazing how many people use their own personal story that maybe isn't as inspirational or as no, inspirational is the wrong word there, but wasn't as positive. Like the history wasn't positive. The family of origin stuff was messy and, like you said, a little chaotic and not what you wanted. But then how they're able to turn that around and really use that insight to help others. So you and this whole idea of intimacy, that's kind of the core at what you work with couples on. Can you just explain what that is and why it is so important in a relationship?
Yeah, and I love talking about all the different forms of intimacy. And so, for just a starting point, when most people hear intimacy, I think closeness is the first word that comes to mind, or maybe sex or physical intimacy, right? That's sort of like the adult code word for sex is like
Right.
intimacy.
Right. Yes.
Um, so physical intimacy, hugely important part of relationships, and we can certainly talk about that part. But just as important, emotional intimacy is really that trust building part. Do I feel seen by the other person? Can I show up as myself and be loved? Do I feel safe to do that? And that's something that I want to bring more into the conversation because the two pieces fit together. But if we have more of one and less of the other, we're out of balance.
Yeah.
And so that's a big thing for anybody, like you said, who's either in a relationship that's not working or they're, out of their marriage, divorced and either not feeling ready for the next thing or they want their next thing to feel different, learning how to build that kind of trust and closeness and emotional intimacy, especially after having, just had this, I'm going to say messy. Not all divorces are messy, like, capital M, but
Right. Right.
there's messiness to all of that unwinding. So yeah, that's absolutely skills that I love to teach and practice, and they are things that we can learn. This was a big part of my journey was I want to know how to do this. Are some people born with this? Do they see it growing up and, magically they can just do this in relationships? Or is it skills and practices that people can learn? And more I find that there are ways and techniques that we can build these things and sustain them over a long period of time.
Yeah, that's such a positive message. I know I was just speaking on a summit the other day and a lady, the speaker right ahead of me, I was listening to her talk and she was talking about the masks that she had worn in her
Mm.
relationships. And whether you want to call it that people pleasing, I know that's a big kind of buzzword now, people pleasing, codependent, like all that stuff. But really when people aren't comfortable in saying this is who I am and this is what I need, either emotionally, sexually, whatever, the kind of house I want to have, the kind of car I want to drive, and when they're not comfortable saying that, you can see where that trust in a relationship would be really hard to come by.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that you said it is so important. Being able to say what I want or need in a kind way, in a loving way, but first knowing what I want or need, and then being able to say it in a way that the other person can hear. So first step, knowing what you want or need. And easier said than done for some people, but if we know what we want or need, then finding the place and the way to be able to express that and to hear the other person's wants and needs and have a conversation about that.
Right.
So, a big thing that I teach in my intimacy shift program is creating time and space for couples to actually have these conversations. Because, especially in busy lives where people are working, there's kids, there's all of these things. When do we actually sit down and calmly talk about whatever it is that we want or need in the relationship? And so, step one in my framework is putting that time on the calendar, really setting it aside, prioritizing that space where we can sit down and work on things. And then there are other steps to make sure that the conversation actually goes well. Because a lot of the people that I work with will say, well, when we try to talk about things, it turns into an argument. So
Right.
we don't want to talk about things anymore. And I can completely understand that. And so we want to build the skills for that conversation to feel supportive and to feel that the two people are on the same team.
Yeah. You want to know something? This just came to me when you were talking, and I was listening because first of all, I think the way you explained it was really, really insightful. But this is the exact same conversation I just had with a financial advisor who was doing a podcast with me. The same thing.
Yeah.
People don't want to talk about money. And when they talk about money, they get into a big fight. And if you think about it, as a divorce coach, typically the two things that people come to me and say there's a problem with is the communication and the money, or the sex and the money. That's usually
Mhm. Mhm.
what it breaks down to. And here's the two experts from two very different fields, the financial side and the mental health side, saying it's the exact same thing. It's that lack of ability to talk about it that causes that triggers some of this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, those are, yeah, very, and I have had conversations with financial advisors where our jobs are quite similar. And I want to help all of the financial advisors out there because they have their area of expertise. And then,
Right.
as therapists, we have ours for
Right.
sure. And so, yeah, I'll share a couple of those steps, not just scheduling the time, but how to have that be a successful conversation because this works, if you are in a relationship. It can also work on your own if you are trying to change your relationship with your finances or with yourself, right? We can't be in relationship with somebody else unless we have a healthy relationship with ourselves. So if you are not ready for a relationship or you're just out of one, like these are also things that you can do all on your own to build your own sense of confidence and comfort so that when you are ready to be in a relationship, you have more of these tools. And so anybody can visit intimacyshift.com. That's my website. And you can get all of this in a wonderful PDF guide with more details. But first step, setting aside that time to talk. Second step is a grounding exercise. So again, with the busyness of life, if we try to talk about something while we are still thinking about the last thing that we did, or we're hungry, or we're agitated, we're headed for a conflict. So once we've sat down together to talk, we want to do something to build that connection, that emotional intimacy that I was describing earlier. And so I advise couples to think about their five senses. It's a quick way to get grounded, to get calm and connected. So if you're sitting under bright lights, for example, not a very comfy atmosphere to have a cozy, relaxed
Right.
conversation about your relationship. So we can turn the lights down. If it's really noisy or really quiet in the room, maybe that's not going to help you feel relaxed. We can put on some soft music. We can also bring touch and closeness into the room where we can either hold hands or take deep breaths for a couple minutes or even just a few moments just together before we dive into this is what our overwhelming schedule has for the next week. Or, how are we going to plan a date night? We haven't had one for a while. Whatever it is that we need to talk about, it's going to go much better if we're coming from that calm and grounded place first. So that's that second step.
I think those are great tips and strategies. And I could see, like you say, for just about any meaningful conversation you needed to have with your partner, is to be able to do that kind of an activity and just have it become the routine that you go through, so that it's now. I've got to ask you this: do you find that that whole men are from Mars, women from Venus,
Mm-hmm.
all that kind of stuff? Do you see that perhaps one part of the couple, whether it's whichever spouse it may be, will be more into this, and the other spouse at least just kind of maybe goes through the motions to try to placate the other person, or tries to, like I always say to my divorce clients, they'll say, yep, I went to family therapy so we could just check that off the list that we've done it. Do
Mm-hmm.
you ever do you how do you get through that if you are the person that really wants to work on the relationship, maybe the other person doesn't have that interest as such a priority? Do you ever see that, and what happens with those kind of situations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I like to also share with people who haven't already learned their attachment style or know about attachment science. A lot of what you're describing for me comes through anxious or avoidant attachment. So it's not across the board, but a lot of times, and in general, in male-female relationships, men tend to be more withdrawing, more avoidant, more kind of shut off, especially from sharing their feelings or doing activities like taking deep breaths together or making eye contact. And as a man, I'm happy to say that, I share some of those things and do tend towards more avoidance unless I practice and work on that. And in general, not always women can seek more reassurance, want to have more conversations, are more willing to reach out for help and for support to talk about what's going on. And of course, those two people find each other and then are wondering years later, like, what are we doing? This isn't feeling good. This isn't working. We're kind of stuck. So, yeah, in a very direct and gentle way, I have lots of conversations with couples and say things like, the way that you have been doing things has gotten you to this place where you feel disconnected and you don't feel seen. So the options are we continue doing these same things or we try to do it a different way and see if that can put the two people on the same team. My goal is always for the two people to feel like they're pulling together. We both want connection. And so, how are we going to get there? And if it's me versus you, or my way is the right way, then we're not going to get there. And for many couples, sadly, like that is a signal. If one person is wanting to work on things and the other person is not, if that happens for long enough, then you have your answer, right? There's
Right.
not going to be that kind of change.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I do have to very like directly call that out in the relationship and let, each person know, or the one person that's resistant, like that is where you are headed. Unless we do something differently and here are options, here are opportunities to try, this will continue the way that it has been.
Right. And thank you for your honesty. So it sounds like the tools that you teach people, even like you say, maybe you didn't grow up with good role models, or maybe you didn't have that opportunity to experience kind of an open, loving relationship all the time in your household. It sounds like these tools are things that people can learn if they choose to learn them.
hmm Yes, definitely. Like I mentioned earlier, going to the gym, right? Like if we want our muscles to grow stronger, we have to exercise them regularly. And in a relationship, if we want to build trust and closeness, then we need to practice skills and spend time working on that. And so having these kinds of regular conversations is one way to do that, not the only way, but it is one way where that time is set aside. Other things, you mentioned communication being a big issue, which it absolutely is. A quick tip or a thing to learn and practice is using I language rather than you language. And so, another area that can make a very big change in a very short amount of time, instead of you always do this, you never do that. It the tone shift and the benefits to doing that are just incredible. And so, yeah, I love when I'm working with an individual or a couple, and we can change that tone to something more like, I really love when we spend time together. And I love how connected I feel when our phones are put down and we can, just cuddle on the couch. Completely different than, mm, when you come home, you're always on your phone and you never look at me. And then, I just want to go to sleep and read my book, right?
Right.
Completely different scenario.
Yeah, it's like expressing your wants rather than blaming the other person. Because I think that the longer couples are together, the more they think they can read each other's minds, or that the other person should be able to read their mind and just know what they want. And I think that's a big issue in any kind of relationship. I mean, even if you're hanging out with your family members, you just expect they should know what might upset you, or what is going to what you want when you use maybe an obscure phrase or some weird statement, that you expect that people just know exactly what you mean when you do that. And that mind
Mhm.
reading, yeah, that mind reading gets us all into a lot of trouble, I think, in relationships.
It certainly does. Yeah, absolutely.
So Dan, I know that you work with, tell us a little bit about the program because I think it's
Mhm.
like, as opposed to therapy that may go on for extended periods of time, it sounds like this program is quite condensed and like dense with great stuff to help you as a couple. So, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd love to, because that's exactly the reason I started it, is because most often couples think about therapy as this really extended, deep work, kind of will go on indefinitely. And sadly, I have many people reach out to me that had bad experiences in counseling. I hear regularly people that, we just had the same arguments, except it was in front of a counselor.
Right.
Or, things got worse because we had been avoiding this topic and then we opened it up and then there it was right in front of us. Um, so I very much want to do my therapy sessions differently. And in this program, I designed it so that it's more concrete. It's a 12-week program where there's weekly online sessions with me teaching skills and implementing practices that week by week we move towards a goal that each person or each couple sets. And like I mentioned, whether you're an individual or you're a couple, that relationship with yourself is absolutely critical. So we're creating objectives that over the 12 weeks work towards healthier attachment with ourselves or a shift in intimacy in our relationship where there's more trust and closeness and more passionate, more connected sex, right? Like I mentioned, those things go together. And so over that 12 weeks, yeah, we have a focus on building skills, practicing these techniques. In between the live sessions with me, there's homework. We're going to check in about the homework. There's accountability so that it's not just, okay, we talked for that hour. We didn't do any of the things the therapist recommended, and then here we are a week later.
Right.
I very much want to see progress towards the goals that you're setting for yourself, for your relationship.
And I think that idea of a finite, like obviously the couple may choose to continue to work with you, to continue to work on skills and skill building and all that kind of great stuff. But I think for so many couples, that whole idea of, therapy is just this kind of highway that just keeps going on and on and on and on forever, whereas 12 weeks is very manageable, right? We can commit to prioritizing this for 12 weeks, and I'm guessing when people start seeing the progress, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. We've got to work on this more and more and more, because I think that's so fantastic.
Yeah, that snowball effect where it feels better and better.
Right.
That's absolutely the goal, and that's what I see with couples who a lot of times feel more like roommates than lovers, or they're walking around on eggshells around each other, and they need for something to be shifted, to be different. And we all know just how busy all of our lives are, the stress that we're under. So whether it's yeah, parenting, finances, family stuff going on. People are, losing friends or loved ones. The stuff that happens is really major. And over this 12 weeks, right, if we have a clear set of goals and a pathway and things start to change for the better, where we're enjoying time with our significant other more, we're looking forward to that time, the benefits are just incredible.
Yeah, yes. And I can definitely see why. And I want to throw this in here now because I always hear this. If people don't wait until they're at the point where I can't take one more day living in the house with this person, if they start an intervention in the relationship very early, like when something just isn't feeling right, you can try it on your own. If you do it yourself for a couple of weeks and you're not seeing a shift, reach out and get some support because,
Mhm.
again, 12 weeks, you could completely turn that around and save yourself going down months or years where you live in the same house but really don't like each other much, or just don't really have that loving relationship anymore. So, Dan, of everything you've talked about, and you have shared some amazing things, and I just think this is so positive. I love the whole idea of this. What do you think is the most important thing you'd like people to remember when they go about their busy day today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, very positive message, and that's That's where I come from, right? Like ever the optimist, right? Wanting to find that silver lining. You are always, one decision away from connection or disconnection. And so I want people to think about during their busy day, how can I reach out for any kind of connection? It doesn't have to be a big thing. If I'm thinking about that person, I can send them a message. If I know that there's something I want or need, I can express it in some kind of way. But we're never really treading water. We're either headed towards disconnection or connection. And so err on that side of connection. Think about, something that you can do, whether it's a new relationship that you're wanting to be different than your old one, or you're trying to repair and rebuild something that's frayed and damaged. We can reach for that connection in small ways.
I love that message. That is so positive. And Dan, if people want to reach out and find out more about you, I know that you have your free gift on your website. You mentioned that earlier. Can you just give us that website again?
Absolutely. Intimacyshift.com. You can leave your email there. It's the best way to connect with me, and you'll get that 12-page guide that has all 6 steps in this framework for having healthy, intimate conversations.
Wonderful. So reach out and grab that. And if you've got friends and family members you've noticed a little bit of rockiness in their relationship, maybe reach out and let them know about this as well. Because again, the more we can get the word out there, the more we can help couples to make the decision to stay together or to know that they did everything they could and then to part company in a healthier way, better prepared for your next relationship. So, Dr. Dan Sneider, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing this expertise and all those practical tips and tools. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for listening in to this episode of The D Shift. And don't forget to tune in again to our next episode. Thanks for listening and supporting the D Shift podcast. If you would like to attend live trainings by our amazing guests and have a chance to ask questions and get answers from our experts, join the D Shift crew. For more details and to sign up, head on over to www.divorcecoachforwomen and click on the podcast page.